Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the work that we've done at Local First Arizona on the ground to try to preserve some of our communities of color and usher in entrepreneurship in those communities. And so the first thing I just want to address that I can tell you that in your community, I can almost guarantee you there's a massive disconnect between your urban planning department and your economic development department. And I would encourage you to facilitate that conversation, because your economic developers, they simply look at a blighted neighborhood as a problem that can't be fixed because of the people in that neighborhood. And really, oftentimes what's happening is that you have policies that are prohibiting entrepreneurship from thriving in those neighborhoods, and you have overzealous building code inspectors that will come in and unnecessarily impose regulations like, you know, your hot water heater is 3 inches too close to your emergency exit, go to the back of the line, and that's another month and a half before you can wait to get another inspection, right? Or, you know, there's just a wide variety of things that they could be imposing on the neighborhood that makes it cost prohibitive to get a business open. In addition, there are things like, if a building becomes vacant for 6 months or longer, it has to go through the whole process of a rezoning potentially. If you wanted to take an old gas station and turn it into a hair salon or something like that, it's going to have to go through a whole additional new process. So there's things you can do. For example, lengthening that amount of time. The building has to be empty for 3 years or more before that triggers. There's a wide variety of things that you could be doing to make sure that your older building stock is able to be used by your entrepreneurial community to help develop those neighborhoods and keep wealth and ownership right there in those neighborhoods. Those are oftentimes the more affordable spaces, and with some sweat equity from the community, they can really rally and get some businesses open. In addition, you need to be talking to your economic developers about looking at those communities and those older buildings as opportunities to create self-reliance and vibrancy and a celebration of multicultural districts in your community. So I want to talk to you really briefly about the work that's being done from Preservation Green Lab up in they started up in the Seattle area with this study where they actually were able to measure vibrancy through a lot of different lenses in communities that have preserved their older building stock. The reason I bring this up is not only because the work is fascinating, but because you can use this work to begin to convince the people who are in control of your policies why these types of policy changes are really important. So this study, Older, Smaller, Better, I highly recommend it to anybody that's interested in policy work around the built environment and land use. This study shows that buildings that have preserved their older building stock, they actually have more jobs per block. They have more people of color employed in those communities. They have greater walkability and therefore healthier lifestyles. They even can prove that the real estate performs better. They have a more vibrant nightlife, and the studies are very detailed where they can go in and actually they did a grid system looking at where the older buildings are. The older buildings tend to be smaller, and those communities that bladed them all and put up new developments actually have fewer jobs per block, less walkability, less people of color employed per block, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really important that you begin to use these types of conversations in order to get policies in place that will enable those buildings to be standing. Now, I talked about this a little bit in the last session, but I want to talk, in over a 6-year period in the city of Phoenix, we transformed the procedure. It's called the adaptive reuse of existing buildings. We transformed it from such a way that we were blocking communities from even getting their older building stock activated to enabling that. Today we've had over 85 new businesses have opened up just in this downtown corridor, all of them in older buildings, and all of them creating primary, secondary, and tertiary jobs in those neighborhoods. So it's really important that we begin to think about the policy behind whether or not that neighborhood can thrive. So, for example, we implemented district bathrooms. So in the old model, every little building had to put in Americans with Disability Act, ADA accessible men's and women's bathrooms and ramps and everything else. That's incredibly expensive. So if you had a strip mall, for example, that had 6 suites, in the old model, every single suite would have to have its own ADA accessible men's and women's bathrooms. So generally speaking, a building would sit empty because nobody could afford to retrofit it, or a property owner would come and just tear the thing down because they thought it wasn't fixable. So I came in and I said, well, why can't we have district bathrooms? When was the last time you were in Forever 21 and they had ADA accessible men's and women's bathrooms? Never, because they're in a shopping mall and they have district bathrooms. So I said, if we could put one set of of ADA accessible bathrooms on the end and the rest of the little suites in the little strip mall had signage, wouldn't you be able to keep that building standing and affordably retrofit it? And the city said, well, you'll never get the disabled community to agree to that. So I went and talked to them. I said, hey, we're losing building stock. We got entrepreneurs that can't afford to open their doors. And they said, oh my gosh, we would totally support it. We just want to know where to use the bathroom. So we brought them in. I went and got the fire department. The fire department absolutely wanted these older buildings occupied because they were a fire hazard. So then the city of Phoenix said, wow, you know, we never thought about it this way. And that was the beginning of a huge transformational process. The first pilot program we put in place, we put 12 small businesses through. It was only in buildings under 2,000 square feet, only in buildings built before 1960. 12 businesses went through. We saved them an average of 4.5 months and $16,000 each in the process to get their doors open. And I'm proud to say that program today is citywide, 500 square miles of city. Any building up to 100,000 square feet built before 1980. So it's expanded exponentially, it's very progressive, and it helps entrepreneurs get their doors open in our older building stock. So I ask you to just think about what sort of performance metrics you want in your community. There's a wide variety, and it goes back for some of you that were in my session on using the right language. You've got to figure out who you're trying to convince to make these changes, and then choose the measurement that works for them. In my community, I have to talk about real estate performance. Boo, who cares? But that's what I have to talk about. In your community, it could be sales tax generated. It could be shade cover. Who are you talking to? Walkability, diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of measurables. Choose the right ones and go with it. And have all of this arsenal in case you need it, but lead with the one your audience is going to hear first. Too often we go in with what's important to us, and that's not resonating with the people that you're talking to. So really, choose those performance metrics. The studies are out there. So this gives you an example of that older, smaller, better report. Per block, if they have older, more diverse buildings, they employ 4.39 people per block as opposed to the newer, larger developments. Now, there's a lot of people in economic development that want to know this information. And if presented in such a way, you can bring them on as allies to go jointly and talk to your planning department about what policies are causing your old buildings to get knocked down. Because that is really, really important that we begin to look at that. And then I want to branch off from that. I don't have that much time left, but I want to talk to you about finance. Just to give you a quick snapshot of the uphill battle that we have in Arizona. It's a newer community. We don't have family banks that have been there for 3-5 generations. We have 96% of our money as a state deposited in non-local banks. Those non-local banks have no localized decision-making whatsoever. 76% of that money is in Just, Chase, Wells Fargo, and B of A. 76% of our money. Their loan to completion rate is 11% on average over the last 5 years. So they are basically saying, we're going to take your money and we're going to invest it far away from here. And we have said as a community, go ahead and take it, we're not worthy. because we don't understand how our money works. So we at Local First Arizona have been working with our, we only have 13 remaining community banks in our state. Wow. Texas has over 500 by comparison. We have 13. We've convinced 65 businesses to move their money to community banks. We convinced the city of Phoenix to move $50 million out of B of A and into our community banks, and the city of Tucson to move $30 million. How? Thank you. I made the case that their money wasn't working for them. You go to your elected officials and you say, you guys keep coming out here and talking about building a vibrant 24/7. And no, you didn't. It isn't going to happen because our money is invested far away from here. So we were able to make those moves. And then the last thing I want to say, in communities of color, what we're doing is empowering our Latino community to get their money localized and to earn credit. The predatory lenders in Arizona are feasting on our Spanish-dominant community. They're lending at 20, 30, 40% interest. And we at Local First Arizona have a program. It's a business accelerator program. It's completely taught in Spanish, 6-month program. They come in and learn entrepreneurial skills, just like most business accelerator programs. But during the time they're with us, they participate in a lending circle. That means that each one, we put them in pods of 12, they save $100 a month, making on-time payments, $100 a month, on-time payments for 6 months. When they graduate, they've saved as much as $1,000. It's up to them how much they want to save. We will match them $1,000 for what they saved, but more importantly, they graduate with a certificate of completion showing 6 months of on-time payments. We've forged relationships with 3 credit unions that will accept that certificate in lieu of having any credit history at all. We've been able to complete, we've had 37 of our first 44 graduates opened up first-time ever checking accounts, and we've already completed 11 loans. Those 44 entrepreneurs have already created 58 jobs in communities of color in Arizona. Bam!
Yeah. Oh, that's it?
That's it.